Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today, in our deep dive into indie and creator-owned comics, we are looking at Assassin Nation by
Assassination, yes.
Kyle Starks. Yeah. I mean, there's no wrong way to say it when he's...
I think
it's so intentional.
Yeah, you're supposed to say Assassination. But yeah, Assassination from Image Comics, written by Kyle Starks, art by Erica Henderson. Yeah, let's get into it. Where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, how can I can't think of another way to start than by saying all week long I've been thinking about recording this episode. I had the day off work today, was not watching my daughter, had a day free, and I was like, why do I really, really want to watch John Wick right now? And the answer is I've been chewing on Assassination all week.
Yeah.
And frankly, I've seen each John Wick movie once.
Oh, wow.
Not nearly enough.
Yeah, I've seen, 4 hasn't quite hit the cable rotation yet, where you can randomly find it on like TNT or FX or whichever channel it's on. But 1, 2, and 3 are on just like all the time.
Well, I'm not sure I need to see 1, 2, or 3 or 4 ever again, but 1 and 2 I'll rewatch. Sure.
There are scenes in 4 that I'll rewatch, and there are scenes in there are sequences in 3 that are also very, very good. But yeah, no,
The dog sequences with Halle Berry are great.
Yeah.
Snaps her fingers and yeah.
Yeah. No, that sequence is great in 3. The final attack on the Continental when it's John Wick and Sharon, Keanu Reeves and the late great Lance Reddick, taking on the assassins there. But no, there are a lot of great moments in those, and you pop in and you're like, oh, I'm 15 minutes from this scene, I'm going to sit and watch. Wick 4 has the same sorts of things. I mean, the big staircase scene at the end, the one scene where the camera angle shifts to like a 3/4 view where you can see in and out of rooms. It has a very video game-ish feel,
right?
Like you're watching. The first thing I thought of was Gauntlet. I don't know why. Where you can see that you're tracking John through the hallways and all that, and you see characters in other rooms, and he's shooting through walls, and that's when he has the incendiary rounds where he's shooting guys with a shotgun and then they're lighting on fire. Which that really just seems like overkill. But no, there are great moments there. But no, I think that is that's the shorthand now, though, right? In a long history of specifically in Hollywood of hitman stories, of assassin stories. It's really been boiled down to John Wick right now. That's the shorthand nomenclature for this type of story. All I can think of with Assassination is this is the absurdist version of John Wick. There are so many elements that really are analogous in both these worlds. It's just John Wick it's very serious. The whole point is that this is quote unquote real, right? In terms of all the stunt work and everything they do. And Assassination is meant to be ridiculously over the top. Like, it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be absurd. It's meant to be farcical in a lot of ways, because it is sending up a lot of those assassin stories, but it's clearly showing love to them too. It's clearly showing a knowledge and a reverence for them in terms of what it's influencing and the parts of those stories that they're pulling from to tell their story. It's like they kind of know that this book doesn't exist if the reader doesn't have that initial knowledge base, right? Of at least some of these of these types of stories, whether or not they specifically know John Wick. You have a sense of what John Wick is, and you have a sense of what these assassin hitmen movies are, and the kind of tropes you expect, the kind of character archetypes that you expect. They're playing off of all of that and mix it all together, and then throw in Erica Henderson's unique art, specifically character design, and Kyle Starks's very weird sense of humor, and you get a book that is that really only they can make like this. No one else can write this story like this.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think the other piece of it that doesn't call out to me as much, but I think reading it in single issue, I had the realization that there's a little bit of a reality show vibe to it with the check-ins at the beginning of each. It's like I can imagine if this were a huge title when it came out, or if it, even if he had the stature he has now, there would be some water cooler talk at a comic shop about which characters are going to get offed this week or this month in the book, because
Yeah, I could see. I mean, yeah.
I think he was going for it, with putting those at the front of each issue.
Yeah. Well, but I think a lot of that goes out the window when how many pages in, 6, 7, 8 pages into the first issue, like over half of them are just gone.
Right. But
like
but then the next week, like if you read that, if you and your buddy read that, and you both met up at the comic shop, 2 weeks later, and you were talking about this book, you'd be like, oh, is there going to be a massive call like that every single week?
Yeah.
If so, this is only going to go a few issues. Like, what's the pace going to be? Who's going to make it? Will Dave make it to the end?
That's interesting. You say that kind of water cooler talk would exist for the reader outside the story, but clearly the world that they built in is that these rankings exist inside the story.
Yes, right.
Like so everyone in that room, when Rankin gets them all together, they all know what their rankings are. So it's this idea of similar-ish to John Wick. This comparison that there is an entire, not just that there's a world of assassins, but they have their own community, and their own inside knowledge, the things that only they're aware of. So when they walk in the room, they know literally where they rank, literally where they stand with everybody else. So that, this isn't just it's not just a meta thing of, hey, the reader is in on, oh, Fernando, he's number one. He's the top guy. When Rankin says that he was the former number one assassin, like he means that literally. Like, I used to be number one. I retired on top. So yeah, it's the kind of thing that those characters would talk about.
Right. It's not mere vanity. It's like that's an actual data point.
It's objective, not subjective in this way. That they can say, and after this first meetup and so many of them die and so many of these assassins are killed, I'm sure someone like Dave or the great F. Tarkington in their minds thinking like, hey, I'm moving up now.
By the way, we deserve so much credit for keeping our friendly rating for this episode in particular.
This one's gonna be This one takes a little.
I don't think we'll be able to for our interview with Kyle Starks.
Yeah, that's coming next week. That it's a little tough on that one.
So creator interviews, I've tried. If they only drop one or two, I try to clean it up a little bit. If they're gonna go Lee Lowridge mode on us, you just gotta roll with it and say, hey, if there's kids in the car, save this little bit for later, and
but this fine. One, I mean, again, it's the guy's his actual name. Like
it's a proper name. I know we shouldn't get penalized for that.
Yeah, but that is what it is. But no, but there is. But again, that idea of this would be the conversation that those assassins would be having. That they know their place on the leaderboard, they know their rankings, and it's meaningful to them. Like, it matters to them where they are in the rankings. Like it matters to be top.
Yeah,
five.
I mean, most of them, they're happy to be on the board. But most of them are not like gunning for number one. Otherwise, it seems like there'd be a really easy answer for.
No, but I although what I will say is I think they kind of subtly solve that plot hole, or potential plot hole, I guess. When right in the beginning, the first thing that happens is Fernando gets killed, right? And then, I'm sorry, who is it? It's Smoke, where she says, hey, like, she shoots him in the middle of this melee where all these assassins kill each other. She goes ahead and shoots for the number one guy, but she's like, I have a legally executed hit, and again, this idea that there are rules, which is out if you've watched John Wick, which I'm sure we'll talk about probably way too much here, but that's the whole thing about John Wick, right? Is yes, it's a world of assassins and all that, but there are rules, and they're very strict rules. You have to follow them. It's not just about going out and killing people whenever, however, like there's a formality to it.
Right.
So
It's a world of assassins
yeah,
with unlimited killing, but
yeah,
not lawlessness.
yeah.
Um,
You know, a man must have a code, like you have to do things properly. And so, yeah, if you want to move up in the rankings, you can't just go wipe out all the other assassins because, that'll probably come back out on you. So yeah, you have to have a legally sanctioned hit, like I'm sure it's like notarized and everything like that. However they go about that in their own world, again, just like you see in the world of John Wick, you got to call into the call center and a hit goes out and all of that things. There's there's actual paperwork that has to be filed and submitted and all that for this to in order for you to have the I don't know the ability the right to go and do your trade. So yeah, it's that idea that it's honor amongst thieves, right? That's what it is. It's that these characters have to follow their own. They have their own morality, I guess. You
right.
know that isn't maybe what everyone else thinks of, but it's what you have to have if you are going to be part of their world, their assassin world.
Yeah. So I I know we're not like plot recappers, but is there any plot that in particular is worth like tracking for the sake of it? I mean, I think the premise is just so simple that
Yeah,
when you get
yeah,
the elevator pitch, you're basically good to go. It's like
yeah.
number one assassin in the world, and then there's the
Well,
big plot twist of like, oh, he's actually calling the hits on himself just to eliminate all of the top 20 and automatically push himself back up to the top.
which I guess if we're going to talk about a plot point, I guess we should maybe talk about that. Because it's not that I don't think it's that effective. I think it's like it's a twist in so much as like it's a twist for the characters in the story, but I think it's something that is I don't know if it's telegraphed, but it's pretty easy to call out. Like I don't think when you at least for me, I remember reading it and thinking like, oh, this is like a big major turn. It's almost like oh, this is the only thing that makes sense. You know,
Right.
it's so I don't know how effective it is as like a big aha moment um for the reader because I don't know if Kyle and Erica did enough to really set up other options. It was I guess it was more in that they try to do things like try to maybe show it was one of the other gangs or whatnot, but I don't know if they put enough effort into the storytelling around those other groups or other individuals to make it possible or plausible that it was someone as to who was behind this. It was the longer that it went, that it was just a shadowy nobody. It kind of, at least to me, it became more and more obvious that it was Rankin himself because they didn't there wasn't enough to point you to any other parties. It was
Well,
just it
I
was
didn't
it was always
know.
just the unknown. You know,
Right. I think it was one of those things where we were learning about the characters based on their logic and their assumptions. When
yeah,
someone was like, it's definitely so and so
yeah,
because this reason. We
yeah,
learn about so and so and we learn about the character who has the theory.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's a way to build character and advance the plot. And since I don't even keep track of all the character names, let alone the off-screen characters that they're talking about, where they're like,
yeah.
"Oh, it must have been so and so who did it." I'm like, "Sure.
Well,
Go kill them."
and then especially the way the story goes, like they get eliminated like right away. You know, as they start working through um who they think it might be based on their experiences in terms of working with the various gangs and all of that, working as assassins, as they start working through what they think their list of potential suspects is, um, like they plow right through them. They're taking them off one by one. Um, and you're right, all we know about them is what we hear our little group of assassins say about them. We
Right.
don't see them in any other way. So yeah, like I said, it doesn't feel like they put enough effort into making you think it could be anybody else because everyone they go to, they just, oh, it's got to be this person, and they confront that person and say, no, it wasn't me. Well, it doesn't matter, and then everyone dies anyway. They kill everybody, and they move on the next suspect, the next suspect. So I don't know if the tension is built as effectively maybe as they may have wanted to. Um, but I don't know if that's super important to the story either. I don't know, because the other kind of mystery, quote unquote, is with the other retired assassin Maxwell, right? Who's
Yes.
there? He's there seeking revenge. His gun literally named Revenge. He's trying to find the person who murdered his husband, which again, they kind of plausibly point you towards Chad Fingerman, right? Who is like Rankin's personal bodyguard. You see that he's an assassin, he's a sniper, he's made some what seem like impossible shots. So you think, oh, it's got to be this guy. And the
guy
twist
who
is
hits the sniper shot while sliding down a building.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And that's Maxwell's whole thing,
it's
right?
A tough
like,
shot.
Yeah. Well, and Maxwell's whole thing is like, only person that could have killed my husband, because these are assassins. He can track back to where the person would have been, and like I think he had to shoot through the windows of a moving like L train or something like that. So the idea is that this is an impossible shot. So at least there they put effort into showing that there could be this other person, as to why at least they put evidence and story evidence as to why Maxwell would believe that Fingerman is the guy. And then the twist obviously there is like, nope, also Rankin. It was he killed him as well. And it was always Rankin. Everything is him. He is orchestrated behind all the things, all the problems they have. So again, I don't know how. I think that's a little more effective because we can see the evidence pile up against Chad in Maxwell's eyes, because we're with those guys for multiple issues,
Right.
in multiple scenarios, versus every time they go up against the next person or a group of people that they think are behind the initial hit on Rankin. So again, I don't think the story twists are the point of the story. It is the setup, but I don't know how important they are to the enjoyment of the book.
I found them fun. I thought it was like
it's a story
elevated.
construct, yeah,
right. It's like it's not just action. It's not just comedy.
Yeah. Okay,
it's not just action comedy. It's like the more elements. It's just more texture to the story.
And that's great. That's a good point. It is. There's something else there. But so this is Assassination Volume 1, because that's how Image always labels everything, even though this is a miniseries, self-contained story. They have not gone back to it. I don't think they ever will. But the last page at the end of the story is all these other assassins, because the world is still bigger. So in the hypothetical situation where there is another volume of this story, of this world, what kind of story is that? It's not going to be the same kind of whodunit mystery, So
right.
So,
now it's like numbers 21 through 30 or 21 through 40.
Yes,
are not content with their ranking. They're like, holy crap! I just jumped 20 spots in a week.
Yeah,
let's go.
But what I'm saying is the story construction for that hypothetical follow-up miniseries is not going to revolve around a who killed this, who set up this. That whodunit part is not why you're coming back. You're coming back for the premise of this world of assassins, which is why I don't think it's as necessary, because that isn't how the story would continue, which means that isn't what the story at its heart is about. The story is about being in this world and these assassins here and what it's like to operate in as one amongst them. So because the next story would be this integration and introduction of all these new characters and what does this world look like when you're right, when 17 or something of the top 20 are all gone, including some of the former greats, everyone moves up. What does that do? That's a different type of story than relying on the twist of who put a hit out on me, or the twist of I'm just trying to get revenge for the person that killed my husband. That sort of thing. That isn't going to be the selling point, which is why I don't think it's as necessary in this story, because this is more about being in the world, living in their world, and seeing how they operate.
Frankly,
that's I think is what's important.
Yeah. Well, and if they were to pick up and say, let's follow Sicario now, or whatever I forget the names of the new ones at the end.
El Sicario is one of the ones in the top 20. He was one that died in the
El Fantasma. is
Yeah,
like the
that was
new
one.
up and
Yeah, I
comer.
think
Yeah,
so.
Briscoe and Jukes Malone,
Yeah.
Sidney Funnel. Um, if the story were to pick up further, then I guarantee you, at least I'll say I'm 70% certain that it would be Assassination colon something, and it would be a new number one rather than in issue 6, volume
Oh
2.
yeah. And,
Um,
you're probably right about that. Especially now that it's been so many years. Again, that is, if they ever would come back to it, I'd love it if they do. It'd be awesome. Again, the idea of Kyle Starks and Erica Henderson working together again.
I was just gonna
The,
say it would have to be the same team.
yeah,
Like Kyle may
but
be able to write
but
more, but
it
unless you get
comes
Erica to come do it, it's not
yeah.
going to feel
But
like a
then
proper
what it
follow
comes
up.
down to is, though, the other part of me is like, I want those two to work together again because I love Assassination so much. But as much as I'd love another story in this world, I almost just want those two to work together on something else now too. Like just put those two together and give me another crazy story. Give me a whole other world, a different story, a different type of story that they want to tell. So yeah, I doubt they ever come back to this. I'd be shocked they ever do. But yeah, the reason you would come back to, the reason you would want to visit with it and sit with the story again is because you're drawn to the world. It's a vibe thing.
Yeah, and
This is a real heavy vibes book.
Yes, yeah, it's vibes from the beginning to the end. I mean, from
Yeah.
the elevator pitch to the
Yeah.
end of the book.
Yeah.
It's this like you're tracking with this vibe or you're not.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I'm curious if this book had any readership much younger than me. Because I think, I mean, no, I'm like, and I think the sweet spot for this book is like if you're in 2024, if you're 35 to 55 and probably male, identify as male, like this is probably what you grew up watching as a teenager, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like this is your brand of action. This is your sense of humor, and like I hope it would be a gateway drug for people younger than that who don't have the nostalgia set up with this stuff. But you never know. And I think one of the names that you threw out, I was saying, I was like, what are some of the directors from that era that were like just so idiosyncratic with like a particular flavor, and they always fuse action and humor? And I think you said Guy Ritchie at first, which I think is a great comp.
Yes. Yeah, the modern day, current
is
day.
a modern comp. Yeah. Like Edgar Wright is a modern one. It's like I don't even know the names of the ones. Like when I was thinking of like a lot of the stuff like Arnold Schwarzenegger did that was like 90s. Like 80s was like pure action.
Yeah.
But then when he started doing things like, there was what's the one where he fired the rocket launcher, or the woman fired the rocket launcher backwards? Commando. It's like there was silliness in Commando.
Yeah, those are a little more unintentional comedy, like Commando and Cobra and things like that.
Last Action Hero, Kindergarten Cop.
But those are intentionally comedies. Those are meant to be. Those are meant to be action comedies,
right?
Versus, you can find that. You can find humor in Commando and things like that. I don't think they were intentionally supposed to be that way. But then I think you have something like
Die Hard.
Like that's exactly what I said. Die Hard is, I don't know if you'd call it a comedy, but it's clearly meant to be funny. Like
yes, like the humor is not incidental.
There. Yeah, but it's not the kind of funny that you get from, let's say, like a Kindergarten Cop. It's a different type of funny, but it is intentionally funny, and it's not the kind of funny that you get from Hot Fuzz or what you try to get from, because I'm not the biggest Guy Ritchie fan, but the Kingsman movies I think are meant to be the current day action comedy stuff,
right?
With the very specific brand of stylized action with that honestly very specific brand of Guy Ritchie humor, so
which is entirely dependent on the actor in the movie.
Yeah. But so
whether they get what he's doing or not. But
and I'm not talking about quality of the movie for the audience. I'm saying that's the vision of the director. The point of those movies is to be in the action comedy. Oh, what was the movie that just came out? Matthew Vaughn. He did the Kingsman movies because that movie Argyle about the author and the spy novel, that is meant to be a straight up action comedy movie.
Right. I saw the trailer and I assumed it was in the Kingsman universe because it was so clearly
That was an
It's
yes,
so clearly Matthew
yeah,
Vaughn.
yeah. That was the name I was thinking of. Not well. Guy Ritchie also does some of that as well, but you know, I mean, you could say
No,
it's
but
something
Guy
like,
Ritchie, it would have
but
Jason
like no,
Statham in it, and you know, it would
yeah,
be
but like
it would be a lot.
Lock, Stock's an action comedy. You could say Snatch is an action comedy.
Snatch is absolutely an action comedy,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
Guy
So
Ritchie
yes, yeah,
masterpiece.
yeah. So he falls in that category too. But Matthew Vaughn is who I was thinking of for the Kingsman movies and this Argyle movie. Again, it's a specific style of action with a specific style of humor. Much like it was in the '90s with all those Schwarzenegger movies. You know, it's the same sort of thing where you're that just it became definitionally what a Schwarzenegger movie was. You know, because that changed throughout the different eras of his career. You know, there was a time when The Rock was doing that. You know,
I remember like Walking Tall.
Walking Tall
they
wasn't
gave
as
him
funny. Hold on,
no,
what
but
was
they
the
gave
one?
him the comedian as the sidekick, right?
Yeah,
In Walking Tall,
yeah, there was
the guy that was really big then. Oh boy, well Johnny Knoxville was in it, but it wasn't.
No. I think you're thinking of The Rundown.
The Rundown. That's what I'm thinking of.
That's what you're thinking. Yes. The guy who played Stifler in American Pie. Yeah, Christopher Walken's in The Rundown.
Yeah, The Rundown is what I was thinking of.
Yes, yeah.
And that is the perfect comp because I think that would be.
You know what? And you know what? In that movie too, I remember
I was in high school for that.
There's a cameo early on where The Rock's character is walking. He's walking into a club, and he walks past Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Schwarzenegger gives him like have a fun or something. He gives him like a one-line thing, and they did that intentionally as like this was a passing of the torch where The Rock was going to be this action comedy hero, movie star now, and he fulfilled that for a while. That was a lot of what he does. You know, I don't think the Fast movies count as comedies.
No, but like the new Jumanjis are like same deal.
Oh, that's good.
It's Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah.
Kevin Hart and Jack Black.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, San Andreas wasn't a comedy. You know what? Baywatch was. I mean, the Baywatch was. That's like a.
I assume San Andreas is hilarious, but I agree that it's not a comedy.
Oh no, San Andreas is that's a. I saw that I think when it came on HBO, and I was like, "That's going to run on cable for 90 years." Like that's the perfect. That's the perfect Saturday at 4:30 on TNT. Every day of the summer.
It's like, it's a punishment for not getting out and enjoying the day on Saturday.
Yeah. It's more in the line, and I it's not as good as this movie. It's along the lines of Twister, because Twister is that Twister. I think Twister airs every single day on AMC. Legitimately, I think Twister is on every single day on AMC at some point. But I love that movie.
Well, there's so much product placement in it that the whole thing's basically a commercial.
That's a funny movie. But it is. I would not say it's an action comedy, you know, because I mean, like whatever movie Philip Seymour Hoffman is the best version of that movie, and that's the action comedy version. But those types of movies where they became action movies that felt they needed to have moments of levity, you know, which is good. You know, you have these, especially something like Twister, something like, and even has a lot of effects, a lot of big spectacle to it, the big kind of blockbuster stuff. Like the Jurassic World movies are very funny. They're meant to be funny, but it's all about the big spectacle, the big set pieces. They just have these moments of levity in there. And that's where the action comedy genre has gone, I think, in terms of movies, where you're not making a straight up comedy that has action in it. You're having someone come in and punch up your script. So it's not like relentlessly grim, you know? So you have interstitials in between the larger moments of action versus having comedy in the action as well, which I think is what maybe it's something that's easier to capture on the page versus on the screen. So because you get that in Assassination where your moments of action, which are the giant melees, the brawls, the gun battles, whatever it is, there's humor in that as well, versus the quiet moments when these assassins are trying to figure out how to talk to each other and relate to each other. There's inherent comedy in that. And that's the kind of stuff you still get in movies or action movies, but it's can you find the comedy in the situation of the larger set pieces. I think that's the stuff that's lost because now people are expecting John Wick in your action sequence. You know, if there's 25 people in a room with guns drawn, like you need to see the action needs to be as slick and as smooth as you see in a John Wick, or it needs to be as visceral and real as something like the Extraction movies with Chris Hemsworth on
Right.
Netflix. You know, it needs to be gritty and real or stylized and slick. It can't be funny anymore. It's almost like if those situations are funny, it's like they're afraid of losing the audience. And maybe that's true. Maybe the audience checks out on that because we've lost that style of storytelling now. You know, it's no longer there in the movies.
Well, and I think I think the publishers didn't like do him any favors here because I do want to talk about Kyle Stark's sense of humor because I think this was the book where they were saying like, you know, it'll have you rolling in the aisles of the comic shop laughing so hard or whatever.
Yes,
and it's like, come on, man. Like, I can't
That's
remember
right.
if we talked about this in the Zero or in an interview
we did.
Never.
We talked about it last week. The idea of the
Jerry Seinfeld thing, right?
You can't tell somebody that something is specifically funny. You cannot tell someone this is funny. I think because
you can't tell them it's the funniest thing they've ever seen because they cross their arms and they're like, sit back, like, all right, make me laugh.
Yeah. Well, in general, I don't think it's hard to tell someone that this is funny, or telling them you will find this funny. That's really hard to do. All you can say when it comes to comedy is like, I found this funny. You know, you can't tell someone this will be funny to you, because it just doesn't work that way. And so
that's what happened to you with Ragnarok. Because everyone told you you would find it hilarious, and you were like,
no. I saw Ragnarok the Thursday at open weekend before anyone had seen it. No, I make that decision was on my own. But in general, though, I am not the biggest Taika fan, you know. And I think before we were recording just now, we were talking about directors that could do this. Even though I'm not the biggest Taika Waititi fan, he is someone, because he has the blockbuster training of working at Marvel, who could most definitely do a book like this, a story like this, where he can infuse the humor into the action. And he does that. He tries that in Ragnarok. Doesn't always work, at least as far as I'm concerned, but that is an example of someone trying to do that, someone to find the humor where it's not an either or situation. It's not like here it's going to be funny in the down times and then, oh, look at this great spectacle of an action scene. You know, there is an attempt to try and infuse some of that, his comedy, his sensibility into those larger action scenes. Again, we can debate as to how effective that is and how funny people do and do not find that. But I can at least recognize and acknowledge that he's trying, and that he can successfully do it in terms of he gets his comedy into those scenes. Doesn't work for me personally, but he does get it on screen. So that I think is at least worth mentioning.
Yeah. I think it's basically every IP Kyle Starks has ever touched has been like claimed for possible adaptation.
Pretty much. Well, all of his creator-owned stuff, I think, has been someone snapped it up it's been optioned.
Yeah. So I'm like, I do think this had nothing to do with why we picked this book, but I do think this book has probably the highest chance of being made into a movie just on the merits of like, we know what it is. There is an audience for it. There are a lot of people who like they know what to expect and they're going to get what they expect. There's a lot of directors who would be like, oh yeah, I'm excited to work on a project like this.
Yeah. Well, I do think his OGN Kill 'Em All, which is already in production. Speaking of Extraction, and Sam Hargraves, the director, that is production at Paramount. So that'll probably beat this one to making a movie. But I do think if a certain type of director can look at this and be like it, because if they made Assassination, if this were adapted into a movie, which I think it could be very, very easily fit into like a 100-minute movie, 110-minute movie, something like that, all the marketing, all of the press, everything about it, all the buildup would be how this is a throwback to the movies you saw in the 80s and 90s. Like it
Oh
would
yeah.
rely. It would. You talked about that age range of potential audience. You know, it would rely on that nostalgia of saying, of specifically saying, Hollywood doesn't make these movies anymore, but we're going out of our way to make another one like this.
Right.
This will be like watching those action comedies of 25, 30, 35 years ago. Which then in some ways now you're putting a level of expectation on the movie now. But whether or not it would deserve that, or it could live up to that kind of hype, that's exactly how it would be marketed. You would make this story with the explicit intent to make it a kind of throwback, because otherwise, because you can't take the humor out of it, you know, because then it becomes it's actually a very boring story. Then it becomes every other assassin story that's out there, you know. It can become it can become John Wick 5 if you take the story, if you take if you suck all the humor out of it, then you know you're left with just
it's still an action whodunit thing. It's like,
yeah,
there's still some meat on the bone there, but yeah, it's like the essence of it is like, first and foremost, if somebody asks me what the book is, I say it's a comedy.
definitely. Yes,
But this is the Kyle Starks thing. It's like, it is not a comedy of like set up, punchline. It's like it's a comedy almost in the Greek sense, right? It's like the overarching thing is lighthearted and it's a funny premise rather than it's just joke, 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 joke. And like, you know, I was trying to give the vibe of it to somebody. I handed them issue number 1 and just flipped to the inside the rankings page, and they were just sitting over there like chuckling, like, "Oh, I really like Wistful Stan" or something. It's like, that's the Kyle Stark sense of humor. Is
David
like
Bowie knife.
You are definitely going to appreciate the little things as you go, but you're not rolling in the aisles of the comic store because, first of all, I've never read a comic that funny. Like what they're promising in the pitch.
Yeah,
no comic is that funny.
Very few things are that funny. Like literally that funny. There are moments, but yeah, it's not that. Yeah, you're right there. It's not that kind of humor, not that kind of comedy. I don't know. I was flipping through because I wanted to find a moment like that, and I don't know where exactly I am. Maybe in issue 2 or 3.
You're
or
in the trade.
like that. I'm in the trade. Yeah.
Do you have page numbers?
Maybe like late 40s, 48, 49, something like that. It was after the drone strike hit. They're kind of sitting around talking about it, and Smoke is talking about Dave is talking to they're talking about how to go about this next kill and how they approach it. And I think it's Smoke who's just like, yeah, I just usually walk to where the person is and shoot him, and that's how I do it. And Dave's like, aren't you worried about witnesses? And she responds like, are you kidding? I'm an Asian woman in America. And then it cuts back to like this little washed out like an interrogation scene.
Okay, that is the funniest.
Yeah, and he said, can you describe the killer? She's like, I don't know, Chinese, I guess, maybe Japanese. And how would you say she was? Somewhere between 15 and 500.
Yeah.
Which is an incredibly funny line, but it's that sort of thing where that's a very specific kind of joke that obviously I find very funny. But like that is indicative of the kind of humor, like this kind of, the idea that you're flashing back to a scene that like, it's not even a flashback. It's not someone's memory, No,
it's a hypothetical scene.
Yeah.
And although it's like, it's hypothetical, but it's also just kind of an amalgamation of way too much reality.
Yeah.
No one questions whether that's what would happen or not.
Yeah, because it's not important if that actually happens. What important
is it doesn't need to have happened.
Yeah.
It's like
it's that kind of.
It also explains how she's so high in the rankings. It's like, well, she can afford to be a little sloppy because no one can peg her age or description.
Yeah.
It's like, and that right there. Okay, that is the epitome of Kyle Stark's like character development.
I agree. Yeah,
he will find one little feature, this kind of almost a throwaway line, and that gets like what, a third of a page or half a page.
Yeah,
for the whole little cutscene.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And it's like you learn and can infer so much about her from that, and that sticks with you after you have finished the book and the rest of the time you read the book. And it's just like it's just a stroke of storytelling genius to say, uh,
Yeah.
look how much I can accomplish with one joke. Like
Exactly. Yes.
it's a
Yes.
joke,
Yeah.
but like we don't pause the story for jokes, which I think is you're not the only person I know who has complaints about like Taika and Ragnarok.
Yes.
And uh the complaint that I heard against it was like that it feels like you're frequently pausing the story for
Every
to
time.
insert jokes.
Well, because
Um
every scene ends with a stinger. Every scene ends, no
right.
matter
Well, I
what they're
mean that's
talking about.
just that's his style.
If it's a funny scene, if it's a serious scene, there's always a ridiculous stinger that ends the scene, cut, move to the next scene, which means you're saying you're supposed to focus on, I don't know, the ball bouncing off and hitting Thor in the head. You know, does not matter what happened for the 4 minutes ahead of that scene. It ends with this gag that has nothing to do with anything other than he has to put a gag there. I'm with it. That is my complaint with it as well, where it has to highlight, hey, this is a joke. Hey, look at this. This is funny. Hey, did you notice that at the end? This is funny. This is funny. This is funny. This is funny. And it's relentless versus what the way that I think Kyle Starks writes here is that you're right. We're not pausing for it. It's in the middle of conversation. And then, so we get that exchange, we get this hypothetical flashback that doesn't matter if it happened or not. And the next panel, we move on to the next part of the conversation. Like there's no follow-up. No one has to react to it. It's just the reader reacts. The reader is given time to react in that little flashback scene. That's where you laugh. That's where the joke is. And then the story just keeps going. But yet we've learned something about Smoke. We've learned something about her, but they get right back into it. So there isn't like a pause, a reaction to be like, hey, that was supposed to be a joke. That was funny. Laugh at this. It just keeps it moving and it's woven into it. And you find yourself laughing at every third panel or whatnot, or finding amusement in that because it's just part of the flow of the story. And at this point though, just under halfway, maybe 40% way through the book, you've read 2 full issues of this, so you already have a sense of what the story flow is and how these jokes are coming out. You get an understanding of what a sense of humor is.
By the way,
yeah.
Smoke, I think it's probably in the mid 40s. There's that page at the bottom third where she says an assassination and it's the all white background.
Yes.
I feel like she looks irresistibly squirrel girlish there. Like it's just one of those things where it's like, it's just so Erica Henderson.
That's that is
it's like playful, but will put you on the ground.
That's very Doreen Green right there. So it's also very funny that's very much the saying the title of the movie in the movie.
Yes.
That's but yeah, which obviously again, I think it's pretty clear they're in on the joke, which is why that's a borderless, backgroundless headshot, an assassin like that. They're in on that joke. They know.
I think and I think that that's also a trope from that era of movie, right?
Yes.
It's like
I
don't know, Deep Impact or Armageddon, to like those movies are going to have.
I was going to say Will Smith being like, what is it? Some sort of Suicide Squad?
I was going back to the era.
James Gunn, obviously.
James Gunn.
Well,
James, that it's too obvious. Like, because
he works. His action comedies, his most famous action comedies, stuff like that, is all centered in larger IP franchise storytelling.
Right. Well, like when I saw the solicitation for Peacekeeper Tries Hard, I was like, oh gosh, it's like that James Gunn character, and then I saw that Kyle Starks got it, and I was like, nothing has ever made more sense to me in my life.
100%. Yeah, perfect fit.
And I have not. I wasn't crazy about the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie. It's probably just a little bit of superhero fatigue at the movies for me, or DC fatigue or whatever. And then when that show came out, I was like, okay, well, I definitely have zero interest in that show. And then that book came out, and I actually read it because it's Kyle Starks.
Mm-hmm.
And was so much better than I thought it could be. Like like I thought that's kind of a tough assignment where it's like the
Yeah.
character's very idiosyncratic,
Mhm.
doesn't have a long history in most readers' minds. Like it's
But it's
really
a
the
but it's a very
James Gunn version.
yeah, it's got a very specific tone now. Peacemaker said, I think I
Exactly.
mentioned that last week. That is Peacemaker now. That John Cena Peacemaker, whether it's in that book or when he shows up in other books, because he works under Waller. What DC's doing right now is they're really building up Waller behind the scenes, and so we see him and members of Suicide Squad in other books like Green Arrow, Titans, things like that. So whenever he shows up, like he is still the John Cena, he's that characterization, so you have to, it's one thing to, if he's in a cameo in a book, he's got like 4 or 5 pages, you can make that and weave that into other stories. But yeah, Starks was given, he was given the role of write this character, and I'm sure with the manual, like it's got to feel, it has to sound like Cena's character, like that you.
Oh yeah, I think I would have said like, DC, I love you, but I'm gonna pass on this one. It just is like it's tough sledding,
Yeah,
and he acquitted himself so well. Like there was an emotional beat in there where it's like, okay, I can see what you're gonna do. I can see what you're gonna do. And it's like, and you still got me. Like you still got me feeling sorry for this guy, even though he's just the worst.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Well, I
um,
I think that is part of the charm and the skill that he has. I think we talked about. I think we talked about it last week. The idea of so many of his stories revolve around this, not so much found family, but disparate group of characters coming together, and that group of characters usually aren't full of best people. Like there are no
right,
good people in his story. Very few good people in his stories. You know, um, Rock Candy Mountain. I think that guy's actually good, the main character there. But like this is a group of assassins. You know, this is a group of assassins.
right,
I
right,
think a book like the Six Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton. Obviously, the whole point is that the actor Trigger Keaton is terrible, but like none of his sidekicks are all that awesome. They're all kind of losers and bad people as well, but they're forced to come together. Peacemaker is the same way. No one thinks Peacemaker's a good guy. He's not. He's a terrible guy. But you can still find ways to infuse heart and like genuine emotion where you feel for them because they are your protagonists, but they don't have to be quote unquote good people. He can
right.
still find a way to make you care, because that's the story that he's telling. He can find a way to bring you into his stories, whether it's about a group of assassins or a community of serial killers or things like that. Like he has a deft touch with those types of characters coming together. I think he knows how to tell those stories well.
Yeah, I mean, well, in no spoilers for that book, but absolutely go check it out. Especially if you liked, Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker show. But if you're
Yeah,
skeptical about it, I would encourage you to check it out anyway because, like, just again, this is Kyle Stark's sense of humor, and this is not a spoiler for the Peacekeeper book, but he gets a puppy and he names it Bruce Wayne because it's like a black and white dog that looks like it's wearing a tux, and he's like, "Oh, you're so fancy, so I'm gonna name it Bruce Wayne." And then someone kidnaps his dog, and he calls Amanda Waller. You see Amanda's phone ring, and she's like, "Oh God, this idiot!" And he's like, "I need your help. They took Bruce Wayne. He's been kidnapped." And she like immediately is like super involved, and then finds out like a few minutes into the phone call as she's like mobilizing people that he's talking about his dog, and just hangs up on him. And it's like, yep, that it's just that's such good humor that it's like that's how you use a dumb character. And it's like, it's so endearing that he cares so deeply for that dog.
I have no idea why I flashed on this, but there's a scene in The Wire, where Method Man's character, Cheese, he's
Yep.
being interrogated and he's breaking down interrogation room because these guys killed his dog, man. They killed his dog, and he's breaking down. And the cops are like, your dog. They're thinking like he killed his homie, he killed his friend. But he's literally saying, no, man, they killed my
Yes, I
dog.
do remember that. Yes.
And not, there were dog fighting and whatnot, but it was like, yeah, that idea of that misinterpretation there specifically around a dog. I don't know. I flashed on that when you mentioned the Peacemaker joke there with Bruce Wayne. That's
Yeah.
funny.
No, yeah, it's just, and it's like, again, well, okay, so that book actually did, I'm not prescribing this to people. That book did actually make me laugh out loud 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
I think this book does as
and
well.
so
Like,
does this book.
I
Yeah.
mean that joke I mentioned, that joke about how old is she? Between 15 and 500. Like that's exceptionally funny to me.
No,
So
I
yeah,
did
there
laugh
are
out loud
moments
at
like
that
that.
one.
But yeah, but there, it's the idea of but I didn't go in. I didn't go into this book thinking it's going to be riotously funny. I just went into it thinking like, um,
It will be fun.
and yes, yeah, yeah. The premise was fun. Um, Again, when it came out, I hadn't read anything by either of them yet. I hadn't read Squirrel Girl yet. I read Squirrel Girl after this came out. Because it was more like, okay, I want to read more Erica Henderson stuff now. So I was not a Squirrel Girl reader when it came out. So, but I knew the name though. So I think you read the solicitation um, last week, and Erica Henderson has first billing. Because Squirrel Girl was such a hit, and at this time, Cal Stark's been doing like Rick and Morty stuff mainly. And he had some other creator-owned stuff over at Oni and earlier books that I had not read. So this was probably the first thing I read where, oh yeah, it probably was the first Cal Stark books that I read now that I think about it. But yeah, I came into it thinking like, this seems like a funny premise. And I assumed because it was Erica Henderson drawing it, that it would have a level of, I don't want to say lightness. Like she doesn't draw grimdark stuff, So I
Right.
assumed it would have a level of levity to it, and I was right. But yeah, at no point did anyone be like, "This is the funniest damn book out there. You're gonna laugh, the whole time reading this." That would have absolutely destroyed the book for me. Coming into it a little bit blind, just off the premise of a former greatest assassin hiring 20 assassins as his bodyguards. Like, I'm in. Just on that premise, I'm in. And so by coming to it that way, and then so coming to the humor almost in the dark, coming to it blindly and finding it versus being told this is supposed to be funny. I think you're right. It totally changes what your perception of the book could be and what it would be. So,
Right.
yeah,
I
there
mean,
are
okay, so
riotously funny
here's
moments.
here's my final comp. I realize we're just making ourselves sound old,
Yeah, we are.
but just lean into it. And I think what he reminds me of, and I'm not saying like good, bad, or anything, or that anyone else has to, but I get the same vibes from this that I get from like Pulp Fiction, like Tarantino, where I Googled it to be sure. Pulp Fiction is listed as a crime/thriller. Every
Yeah,
clip that I see on the internet is funny
are the
from Pulp
funny
Fiction.
clips. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Because it's like it's a comedy forward like crime thriller and not a comedy with, thriller crime vibes.
yeah,
And so I'm like, because that like, if Sam Jackson like shoots somebody in the head, he shoots them in the head. Like
yeah.
they're dead. It's not a comedy like that. And assassination, it's like when half the list gets killed in the first issue, they're dead. Like,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
bloody and it's gory and it's violent. And Tarantino, always the third act of a Tarantino movie is just a total bloodbath.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Hateful Eight gets whittled down to none. Does anyone survive that? Maybe one per. I feel like it's a Tarantino thing for like Django Unchained. There's one character that leaves at the
Well,
end.
I mean,
Um,
I was thinking of which, like, what are the funniest Tarantino movies?
Django,
Yeah, I would say,
like
I don't know.
Django and Pulp Fiction,
I
maybe
think Kill,
Reservoir Dogs.
I think Kill Bill's funnier than those. You know,
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I
you
always forget
know,
about Kill.
I think Kill
But
Bill
that's
is
like my
funnier.
high school era.
Yeah, but again, none of those you would classify as comedy first. But he is someone that he can introduce comedy into his action sequence. He is someone that does that. He can find humor in that. Um,
Because
in
I think
Paul,
the inverse of him would be like Joss Whedon, where it's like
yes,
he takes
it's
the
it,
action seriously, but it's like cartoonish violence and it's campy humor.
it's very quippy humor. It's everyone is Spider-Man. everyone is Peter Parker.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yes.
everyone in the midst of the battle just has the right thing to say. Because that is more important, because it's all about who the characters are in the battle, not so much what the battle is. Not the action. You know, the action isn't important. The action is just there. It's about what the characters are saying and doing and interacting. And every character is going to be funny and quippy. Yeah. Versus, yeah, I think what Tarantino does is that, yeah, he wants his action set pieces to look and feel a certain way, and there's going to be tension. It's going to be very gory and very bloody, very quote unquote real. But a lot of them are going to be infused with humor. Again, not on the level that I think what Kyle Sharks and Erica Henderson are doing, where or at the level of what you saw in some of those 80s and 90s action comedies. But you know, there are attempts at it, you know. It's just that comedy forward action is just it's not there as much anymore. I don't even want to say it's a dying breed. It could be dead, you know. Or maybe it's just the people making them aren't making them good, you know. Like, as far as I understand, like Argyle flopped. It was terrible. And that wasn't because the action wasn't good or the comedy wasn't good. I think it's just a poor movie. Like, that's my understanding.
I
You know,
mean,
so I don't
yeah.
know.
My guess with a movie like that is, it probably died in the editing room.
Maybe
Like,
so.
I watched the really bad Men in Black movie with Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson,
Which one
and
was that? Was that the
International or
international?
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I like
Men
the
in Black,
whole
another great
movie.
franchise like that. Yeah.
I
Right.
felt like, man, I think they just did like a bunch of takes, kind of improvising, like, banter, and the editor just chose the wrong one every single time. Like, that's what it felt like. Because like the plot of like the story that they had come up with was kind of an original contribution to the Men in Black universe. It was interesting, and we know that Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson have chemistry. So it's like, you got a story, you got an IP, you've got two actors with chemistry, and you couldn't make it work. Like,
Yeah.
that has to be just like, either the director just didn't let them cook long enough when they were like riffing, coming up with like, here's some zingers for the end of scenes and
Mhm.
stuff like that, or they had them there and the editor just had every wrong impulse. Which,
And
that's a tough job when you're like something
yeah,
highly
yeah,
improvisational
yeah.
and you're the editor.
Well,
That's way
and
too much
maybe
power.
that's what it is. Maybe that's why this genre has waned in such a way that it isn't that people don't want funny action movies. It's just that maybe the premise and the execution of it, like the movie itself, just doesn't work, you know, for whatever reason. Maybe outside of the action and or comedy aspects of it, there are outside forces of just a lot of these movies that have come out they haven't worked. They haven't been good. And so when a movie like that flops, the lesson is, oh, people don't want to see this. When maybe the lesson just is like, get better filmmakers, you know? Maybe it's
Right.
that sort of thing. And so then when one does hit, it
And they're
becomes the
like,
exception, not the rule,
no.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's not that people don't want this genre, they don't want these types of movies, is that the ones that have made their way to release had just been bad movies. And they would have been bad movies 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is, you know? So maybe it's just that, and you're taking the wrong lessons from it. So yeah, it could be something like that, where if someone came along and has made a really good one, yeah, that it would hit. It would hit. And I think
Right. Well, I
some
mean,
of those
studio
Matthew Vaughn
executives are like the case study in
Yeah.
taking the wrong lessons from
yeah,
things,
yeah. But
because
I
it
think
took what's his face, Kevin Feige, like 19 movies to convince him to have a female lead as the title character of a movie.
yeah.
And their argument, this is real story,
Yeah.
was every time he had brought it up in phase 1 or phase 2, they were like, people just don't want to watch a female superhero. Look at the numbers for Elektra.
Yeah.
It's like, but that was a terrible movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it was a good movie that no one watched. It was a terrible movie. Like,
Yes.
you can't, and you like, I just, like, Kevin Feige was, my understanding is that he was fighting the good fight. He's pushing for
He
it
was
for
trying
years
to,
and
yeah,
years and years,
yeah.
but he just didn't have autonomy.
Well, you know, that's I promote for you. But you know, you're right though. It is this idea of it's not the genre that people don't like. It isn't female superheroes. It's just that maybe you didn't make a good movie, you know, make a better movie, have a better story, a better premise, whatever it is. so yeah, he said if someone came along, and I said I think that's what happened with those Matthew Vaughn movies, is that people really liked that first Kingsman movie, right? And so now it's just every movie he makes is in the Kingsman style, and it's not because that style doesn't work, people don't enjoy it. It's that some of the movies just don't work. They're not good, like the various Kingsman sequels and or prequels or whatnot, whatever that expanded universe is that he's got going on there. It's less about the format and the style, and it's just maybe the script sucks,
Right.
maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's just a bad movie. Yeah. So I think maybe that's where this genre has fallen. And I think when you look at other genres that are in a similar boat, I think the romantic comedy is in a similar place, right? In terms of big blockbuster releases, right? I think you can find the romantic comedy is on Netflix. I guess they've kind of cornered that, and it's become like a YA genre now. And it's a lot of it, I think people will point the same thing of like, well, we tried to release this movie 15 years ago and look how bad it did. It's like, well, that movie sucked, it wasn't any good. If you had When Harry Met Sally again, it would do really great. But this movie ain't When Harry Met Sally or Sleepless in Seattle or whatever it is. So I think it's that happens with these genres. And I think action comedy, the stereotypical action comedy, the one we think of, the one that Assassin Nation is in, that box that it's in, has just suffered from some really bad movies, maybe thinking they could just get by on the action or on just the comedy, and you forget that there's got to be something else in the middle there. There's got to be something holding it all together. It can't just be all action. It can't just be all comedy. You have to have something else at the heart of it, which I think, as we talked about, it's what Kyle Starks does really well, is finding the heart and giving you a reason to care about these characters inside of what's a wildly absurd situation. And I think that's what some of the action comedy movies have missed, that it can't just be gag, 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 explosion, explosion, explosion. That just isn't a movie.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So my last question, or I guess my only question for the night, is about the actual ending. Do you take it to be that they killed him in his hospital bed?
No. Because again, I think assassins have rules. Wait,
wasn't he in the top 20? And at the
no.
end of the trade, he's not. Okay.
No, because Maxwell was retired, so it's the top 20.
Right. Okay. I got it.
Top 20, but number 2, Taipan wasn't there because he was specialty contracted out. So so Maxwell isn't. He actually is retired. He was only there for revenge. So no, I think maybe part of the idea is that.
Oh yeah, and he has to find out that his husband died only because.
They were trying to take him out. Yes,
collateral damage.
Yeah. So
which is like, anytime a villain calls someone collateral damage, they're getting a bullet to the head.
Yeah.
That's like the trigger for the hero.
That's irredeemable. Where that gives our hero, quote unquote, the license to do whatever they want, right? And so
when John Wick's dog was collateral damage, it was like,
yes,
kill anyone you want for the next hour and a half. We're all fine with it. You have moral carte blanche.
That's exactly where I was going to go. Maxwell is the John Wick character, because I think that ending is meant to imply that, like, you're never out. That once you come back in, you're never out.
See,
so
I thought it was more ominous than that. I thought it was
I don't
he re-entered the game for revenge and now he's dead.
Yes, I know. I didn't read it that way. That's interesting. I read it as just like,
I didn't want to.
Yeah,
like
I read it as
he's my protagonist. By the end of the book,
100%.
He's who I'm rooting for. He's the only one I care about.
And I think
other than Dave and F.
Yeah, no, I think you're supposed to be rooting for him, but I read that as basically being like, this world continues. You're not out of it yet. Yes, you took out this top 20, but there are more of us out here. So I read it as more just like, you're never out of this. You can't wipe your hands of being part of this world of assassins. And so maybe it was ominous of just like, you can't walk away, but I did not see it as then they, like, this wasn't like a Tony Soprano ending where you seem like he dies right then and there.
Right.
Now, if one of them had held up like that notarized contract and been like, this is why we're here, different story. And if we don't see the ending, then I would say yes. But I think that was more just saying, hey, you came back, and just because all all of these other top 20, 17 or whatever them are eliminated, plus rank in the former number. Like just because you got rid of all of them and maybe took out some of the high ranking gangs in the city, just because you did all that doesn't mean this wheel stops turning. You know, this is still
Right.
going on. That's how I read it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a much happier ending, and I'm glad because I didn't want him to die.
No.
And I would love it if he in a follow-up series in my head canon in the next people jockeying for number one, he chooses to act as like a mentor to someone. He's like, no, I'm out of the game, but I'll answer your questions, I'll give you advice.
Yeah.
And someone interprets that as him being in the game.
And he's drawn back in, and he's drawn back in.
Now he has to hire the assassins to protect him from the people who are like trying to out him. So, or the guy he's mentoring has to become his bodyguard.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that. I'm like, yeah, I think he's the most interesting character.
That's a Ryan Reynolds movie, right? The Hitman's Bodyguard.
Yes.
That's an actual movie, isn't it?
And that's
Ryan Reynolds.
You know what?
Action comedy.
Hilarious. Hilarious.
Is that Sam Jackson?
Sam Jackson is in it.
And Ryan Reynolds, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And Sam Jackson is married to Salma Hayek. And
that was a sequel, right? Too. There's a sequel, right?
I didn't see the sequel, but the first one, it was like the only memorable spit take I've done in a movie theater was a line that just completely caught me off guard, because Sam Jackson was talking about how he and Salma Hayek met, and it was like some supercharged sexy brawl at a bar or something like that got like really graphic and violent. And he's telling Ryan Reynolds about this, and it has cut to the scene, and it's in slow motion. Like there's like blood splattering and beer spilling, and they're like locked eyes across the room. And he's like, so you guys met on Christian Mingle? And it's just like the Ryan Reynolds delivery over like wistful Sam Jackson. It was just like a line that only he could deliver, and possibly was not even in the script.
You never know.
With Ryan Reynolds, I never know. Like the scene in Deadpool 2 where they're interviewing candidates for the X-Force, I'm like, was that like a blank piece of paper that was just like, here's the characters you need to talk about, go nuts? And he and TJ Miller just teed off, because they clearly had a blast making that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have on this book. I mean,
that's it too.
I feel like it took about an hour to read. It took about an hour to discuss. And
it is a.
I'm here for more.
Read. Yeah, no, it's a fast read. I think and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a genre that flies by, but I think you can go back and still you can find funny stuff in the artwork that Erica Henderson is doing. I think you can go back through and you can revisit.
There's little humorous Easter eggs too.
And so I think it's a book you can revisit for scenes and sequences, like, oh, this is when they go and take on this gang here. Oh, here's the drone strike when Wistful Stan died. Like you can revisit moments there that I think just remain funny even in isolation. But yeah, overall it's a quick read. It's a fun read. It's a genre that
it's second to last page. His get well card on his nightstand.
Oh, yeah.
Just says get well, signed by Dave and you can only read UCK.
Yeah,
but you know who signed, and it's like looks like a second grader's handwriting for him.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So it's just like one last little Tarrington
gag,
joke for you.
Yep.
Just great.
This is a fun book. It's a fun book to go back to.
Tarkington. Sorry.
Yeah, Tarkington. Yeah, Tarkington. No, it's a fun book to go back to. And like I said, it really does. It makes me wish for more projects more collaboration between Kyle Zark and Erica Henderson, whether it's more in this, like a sequel to this book or just another story. Like I'd read it in a heartbeat, because I think these two work so well together. They seem to have an understanding of how each other's sense of humor works and how best to put that on the page. So, it was a fun book to go back to, fun reread. And, I'm looking forward to next week here when we get to talk to Kyle.
Yeah. I've spoken to him in person a few times, just like and this is this is a high praise and a high bar to clear. One of the nicest creators out there.
He's very personable. He loves to talk. He engages with everybody.
He talks to you like a peer.
Yeah.
Like there's just no ego at all.
He's really great at shows. I've met him a couple of times at shows. He's always great. I said he's someone that spends a lot of time at his booth, which is increasingly rare.
Right. And very frustrating for the people who don't, when you're like us and we go to these shows just to talk to creators.
Yeah. And I get it. If you gotta go be somewhere for a panel, that's one thing. But a lot of them, I understand. You go to a show and
it's their 4 days social time too. No, I don't fault
they want to hang out. They also have to get work done. So many, especially artists, that you see updates of like, oh, they're at a show in Chicago, but it's Thursday night and they have their portable tablet out and they're drawing pages. They're doing that stuff. Shows. Yeah.
Last one we were there as soon as it opened, and like the second or third booth I went to was Jay Lee. I didn't want to bother him because he was already like sketching commissions and he was booked for the day on commissions already. Yeah. And I was like, I just wanted a signature. And he was like, oh, it's no problem. I'm like, feel free to finish whatever you're doing. He's like, dude, come on. Like, do you know how many times I pause commissions to do signatures and take other commissions? He's like, I'm a professional. I can pick up right where I left off. And I was like, but his work is so intricate that I thought, like, surely you got to finish your thought. But
no, Kyle Starks is great. He's great to talk to at shows. And so, looking forward to talking to him next week. That's going to be a blast.
Yep. We will see you next Thursday. As always, find us on social media, shout us out, give us book recommendations too. It's like, we don't get many of those. Usually we're so busy cramming book recommendations down people's throats that they don't come back to us the other way. But by all means,
and back and forth between you and us, throwing books back and forth.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I feel like just listening to our podcast is a sufficient book club for a year for someone.
Pretty much. Yeah. I hope so.
I mean, you're probably reading 35, 40 trades a year. With this podcast. You get a couple weeks off for creator interviews and 0 episodes, but man, it is the faithful few, I think, who read every single book we read.
We appreciate that. But if there's a genre we're missing, a type of book that we're missing, I know both of us can tend to fall into the kind of lanes of reading the same types of stories over and over again, because obviously we like that, we're drawn to that. But if we're missing something,
and we're certainly locked into our list of favorite creators too. So
of course,
but there's nothing that brings me more joy than stumbling across someone
new. Yeah, absolutely.
Someone like Sarah Gailey last year or the year before, where it was like, who is this person? And then I was like, oh wait, I love all of this.
It's always great to find. So storiedarcs.com. Hit us up there on social media. Let us know what you think.
I think we have a slight preference for Blue Sky over Twitter, but we're still technically present at both.
Yeah.
Anyway, we will see you next Thursday for an exclusive interview with Kyle Starks. It's going to be a blast. Can't wait for you to hear it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.
Later.